Welcome to tonight's program, which is entitled Creating a Successful Business Plan for Your Startup, Tips and Tricks from the Trenches. And I would like to guess just to begin by asking, for how many people is this the first MIT Venture Lab? Quite a few, okay. And how many of you, if I may ask, are entrepreneurs or thinking about starting a company or working with one? Great, okay, we like to see that. The reason I ask is because the role of Venture Lab is to help entrepreneurs succeed. We want to help you learn how to plan, fund, and operate a profitable company and sell it or do whatever you want to with it for lots of money. And business planning is obviously a key part of that. My personal experience in working with entrepreneurs, which I've done on a fairly concentrated basis over the last 3 or 4 years, is that business planning is one of those things that is hard for a lot of people to do. It's a lot more fun to create a product and to think about all of the cool and neat things that you'd like to do with your product or service than it is to actually sit down and do the kind of tedious work of offering a plan, and yet that plan is what investors need, and even some of the people you might like to recruit, just to know, where you're going and just to know that you do in fact have a plan. A little bit about the MIT Enterprise Forum. There are 28 MIT Enterprise Forums around the world. The Northwest chapter of the MIT Enterprise Forum is one of the largest and most active of any of the global chapters. The Venture Lab is a program of the larger Enterprise Forum. I'd also like to let you know that there are a couple of programs that are going to happen a little bit later this year. On April 26th, we have the MIT Demo event, which is a very popular event where new companies get to demonstrate new products and prototypes. So that'll be coming up on April 26th. The MIT Enterprise Forum dinner on May 8th is the last dinner of this year, of the 2011-12 season. The title is Energy Storage for the Grid, Watchful Waiting or the Perfect Storm. For people who are interested in the topic of sustainability and green technology, that should be a very exciting program. I may have neglected to introduce myself. I'm Dave Watts. I'm the vice chair of the Venture Lab. And we have Chip Hallett, who shares a vice chair role with me on the Venture Lab in the background. And we have other members of the MIT team who are here. And if you have any questions about the Enterprise Forum or interested in thinking about maybe volunteering to help out, please let any one of us know. We're identified by one of these little purple ribbons on our tag. I'd also like to just take a moment and thank our sponsors, those whose names were on the splash sheet that was up here earlier. Of course, none of this would be possible without them. So if there are any sponsors in the audience tonight, do we have any sponsors, just out of curiosity? May I ask which company you're with, please?
I'm representing UW.
UW, okay,
Right.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your sponsorship. So I think with that, enough introduction. I'd like to introduce tonight's participants. Tom Huseby, the founder and managing partner for Seapoint Ventures, and Bryan Brewer, CEO of Business Plans Northwest. And just to say a few words about each. Tom has been part of the Venture Lab before and educated us and entertained us a few years ago, and we welcome him back for a repeat performance.
Good to be here.
And Tom is well qualified to speak on the subject of business planning. He's played operational management roles for about 25 years of his career. And for the last 15 years, he's been involved in 22 startup ventures. He currently works with 3 different venture funds and sits on 5 boards, Tom? 10 boards, excuse me, off by a factor of 100%.
Who's counting? Who's counting?
10 boards. Okay, that's a lot of boards.
Yeah.
But the more relevant thing in terms of tonight's topic is that he has had to review and study literally thousands of business plans. So he, I'm sure, has some thoughts about what matters and what he's looking for when he's thinking about the companies that he wants to recommend the people that he works with become involved with and start writing checks for. Bryan Brewer has a similar deep background and experience. 20 years
that
of...
just means I have gray hair.
I think that applies to, applies to all of us up here. For the last 12 years, Bryan has helped clients raise more than $20 million in angel investment. And he helps them by helping them learn how to write and create a viable, strong business plan, and to then be able to pitch those plans to potential investors. So he has a lot of coaching experience in his background, working with a number of the startup organizations, some of which I also have worked with, Zeno Society, Northwest Entrepreneurs Network, the University of Washington Business Plan Competition, Seattle University, Washington Technology Center, where he was a pitch coach for those folks, and the Washington Biotechnology and Biomedical Association. Currently he's working with, I'm sure many of you have heard of Seaton Grass's new incubator, the Surf Incubator, for mobile software development, and I believe you're an advisor to Surf as well. So that's great, and before he started working with startups, he served in a number of management positions for both large and small companies, with an emphasis on marketing and product management. So with that, what I'd like to do is, well, maybe I should just say a word about the format before I turn it over to you folks. For about an hour, Tom and Bryan will present and discuss amongst themselves various aspects of business planning. And at the end of that time, somewhere around that time, we'll open it up to the audience for questions and answers, and we'll take it forward and run that up until probably about 8 o'clock, and or if we run out of questions, which almost never happens. And I'm sure that if there are remaining questions, that Tom and Bryan would be happy to make sure that either afterward or through follow-up emails you can get those questions answered. We don't have programs for tonight's program. We have them, but they aren't here, thanks to the traffic situation. But we do have all of your emails, and we will email a PDF of the program so that everyone has a digital copy and has a record of tonight's program. There will also be videos available through our website. Those get put on YouTube, so you'll be able to see the entire program in its entirety. Okay, with that, Tom, I think I'll turn it over to you to kick it off. And thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So I'm going to start out talking about why you need a business plan, and then we're going to turn it over to the expert. I am so excited to be sitting up here with Bryan, because I get asked all the time, what's the best format for a business plan? And now I'm just going to say Bryan. Right? He's gonna talk about it.
That's the new format.
Yeah, there it is. So the most important part of a business is sitting right in this room. You people are what make the world go around, and in particular, you're what make the United States a great country. Kyle reminded me of, I was asked to speak at the entrepreneurial, whatever it was, the Entrepreneurial University, that's what it was. And it was right, unfortunately, 2 or 3 days after 9/11. And you could feel fear in that room. You know, most entrepreneurs, including myself, are out of work. I always say it's much easier for me to start a company than it is to get a job. And I've proven that over and over again. So you're sitting there in an economy that's scary, and you're a big room full of people that don't have jobs and are hoping like mad that they can actually beat the wolf to the door and raise money or kick a business off and get cash flow going before. And I just looked out that room and, oh my gosh, I said, this is what makes us great. Here we are, all terrified. What was going to happen next? And there's a whole room full of people starting businesses. My gosh. And I told the story of, why does that happen? There are all these theories. Why do Americans start, why does America, and soon to be Americans, why do we attract all of these people that come to our shores, were born here, who somehow want to start businesses? And we have people from all around the world come here to start businesses. Thank goodness. Why does that happen? And I figured it out. And I told the story of my firstborn, Connor, who went off to kindergarten, and I cried. It's terrible if you have kids. It's just, oh my gosh, there he goes, got on the school bus. I got over it in a couple of months, but there he was, launched, and about 3 months into his career, I came home one night and he was standing. He had this cute little sweater on. He was standing by the back door like this, and he had a big star on his chest that said "Child of the Week." And I think to myself, oh my gosh, apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This is fantastic. I go, Connor, Child of the Week. He goes, yeah. And I said, well, how'd you get that? And he goes, I get to set the clock and ring the bell. I said, yeah, but how come it's, and I get to open the curtains after nap, and I get to bring the teacher an apple? And I said, yeah, but Connor, how come it was, and he goes, and I tell everyone when it's time for a nap. And I go, okay, but how come you're Child of the Week? And he goes, oh, it's my turn. And I just love that. So the reason we start all of these companies is we have great kindergartens. He won't remember that it was his turn. He'll just remember he was Child of the Week, And you're all in this room, Children of the Week, all right? You're all getting something going. You're making that courageous step to go out there and start a business. It is so cool. And that's why I flew back from Florida, and I was down in California, and I came up here because I just love talking to entrepreneurs, because you're halfway there just by saying you're going to start a business. The other half is the harder half, and that is actually starting it. So I'm gonna turn over to Bryan in a second. He's going to take us through what a business plan is, but I'm going to tell you first of all why you need a business plan. In order to do that, I've got to tell my famous Irish Shepherd and the venture capitalist joke. Has anyone in here not heard that joke? All right, so all I need is one hand. All right, so there's a number. It's true. I love telling this joke. So this story about the Yankee venture capitalist on vacation in Ireland. And he's out for a walk early in the morning. He walks up behind a shepherd in the middle of nowhere, and he goes, "Morning!" And the shepherd whirls around and goes, "Oh, you scared me half to death." He says, "Are you a betting man?" And the shepherd says, "Well, at times I do." He said, "I'll bet you $100 against one of your sheep. I can tell you how many sheep you got in this valley." So the shepherd thinks to himself, all day long, all I do is count my sheep. There's no way this fellow's going to know. He says, "All right, you're on." So the venture capitalist reaches in his pocket and takes an envelope out, turns it over, and looks across the valley, and he goes, 719. He says, "This be more than count. I don't know how you did that, but you won fair and square. Take your pick." So the venture capitalist bends down, picks an animal up, and starts walking away. And the shepherd says, "Hold on now." He says, "How about double or nothing?" So the venture capitalist says, "What's the bet?" He said, "I bet I can tell you what profession you are now." So the venture capitalist thinks to himself, an Irish shepherd in the middle of nowhere has probably never even heard of a venture capitalist. He goes, "All right, you're on." He goes, "I bet you're one of those venture capital fellows now, aren't you?" He says, "You're right. Here's your animal. Here's $100. How in the world did you know?" He says, "Well, first of all, you showed up largely uninvited. Second of all, you did a fantastic back-of-the-envelope analysis. I'll never for the life of me know how you did that. And then in the end, you picked the dog." Anyway, it's a good joke, isn't it? So what we're all about is trying to avoid either walking the dog or picking the dog, right? Now I don't like to read business plans. I'll say it right up front. I am done with reading business plans. I've reviewed probably 2,000 businesses. That's just in the last 15 years of my career. Well, there's a few before. But oh my gosh, I am so tired of reading business. You just can't believe it, right? So what I want to do to decide whether I'm interested in the business is I want the entrepreneur to give me a really short summary, maybe just PowerPoint, and come in and deliver it to me. And that way I get a good idea for what the business idea is, and I get a good idea of what the entrepreneur and his team or her team is like. And I need those two things to decide whether or not I'm going to take the next step, which is to dig in. But oh my gosh, I will not invest someone else's money unless there's a really solid business plan there. And I will read every single word in that business plan before I part with someone else's money. Now, the reason I do that is not to grade your business plan. The reason I do that, I'm sure yours will have great grades, right? But I don't give grades out to business plans. This is not your high school essay. This is, or your college project. This is real life. And I have to invest other people's money in real life things. And if I don't read the business plan, I will be so in love with the idea that I will forget some of the fundamental drivers of that business if I don't read that business plan. And when I read a good business plan, all of a sudden, or even a bad business plan, it's even easier with a bad business plan, I'll go, oh my gosh, they forgot to count the noses. They don't really know how big this market is. Or there's no competition listed. Or it'll be one thing after another. Because the better the idea, the less focus we get, or the easier it is to forget, easier it is to forget what the important drivers are of the business. And a business plan, it can be painful. I actually, when I write them, I have a lot of fun because I'll come up to some section where I go, and then I'll go, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about this. This could be a complete blindside. What am I going to do to figure my way around? It's not how do the words look right. You know, maybe it's how do you deal with the fact that you want to open up a Chinese restaurant and there are 5 on that block. You know, well, you're going to say this is going to the new Chinatown. Everyone's going to come. There's lots of people. I don't know. But you'll come up with some reason why that's good. And since it's your life, you'll probably be honest about that. I made that reason up, but there's a lot of other reasons that'll come out in writing the business plan. So I won't part with someone else's money unless there's a really solid business plan. And you will not, I guarantee you, have a really good idea unless you take the time to write a business plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, and Bryan's going to talk about why you write the business plan and what the content is, and I'm going to react to it. And so I'm going to sit here with you and listen to what he has to say with great interest. All so right. Bryan, it's over to you.
So this is, if you're a sports fan at all, this is kind of like I'm the play-by-play and Tom is the color.
Right.
Color commentator.
I'm sort of the guy who used to be good at the athlete. I'm sitting here wondering if my tie looks right. So, go ahead.
Sure. So excellent introduction about why you need a business plan. But let's talk about, let's see if I can get this to work here. What is a business plan? So, you know, I remember when I started in this work about 12 years ago, I was working in a firm, and someone asked me, well, Bryan, we want you to write the business plan to spin this business out of the firm. And I thought, business plan? Gosh, I've never even seen one of those. So there's always a first time someone will see a business plan. But I got the assignment, and I discovered that my background in journalism and writing, I've been a freelance writer for many years, and then the business experience I had, they kind of came together, and I thought, oh, well, this is a good thing. I wrote the business plan. It was fun. I saw how it all fit together, and it was successful for this company. And they spun it out, and then I went out and hung out my shingle, and I've been doing this as a consultant ever since. But so I talk about business plans all the time, but I thought when I put the slides together for this presentation, I thought maybe I ought to answer this question, what is a business plan? And maybe you have some of these same thoughts. So is it an idea? Well, of course, there has to be an idea involved in it. Is it a set of strategies? Absolutely, that's a part of it. It's about how the different components of a business fit together and how well they work and to go out and be successful. Is a business plan an implementation plan? Well, hopefully, yes. Hopefully the plan will have enough information in it so that you can use it as a guide for what you're actually going to do, what you're going to execute when you do your plan. Is it an executive summary? So I'm just mentioned that in the what he wants to see initially from an entrepreneur is a short summary, either a PowerPoint slide, that's the next one here, a slide presentation, or an executive summary. Those are expressions of the business plan. And then, of course, there is the written formal document that most of us think of as the business plan. That's maybe 20, 25 pages for a startup. And finally, there's the financial projection spreadsheet part of this that underlies all of that. So a business plan, you can think of it as all of these things. They're all the components that go into it. So when someone says, do you have a business plan, you might want to ask them, well, what do you mean by that? And be clear, because there's, how many people were here last month for the Meet the Angels? A number of people, right? Got a very interesting question from the audience in the Q&A part from a fellow sitting over here that said something about, well, I've heard that you don't really need a business plan to raise money from angels. And what I didn't actually talk to him, but I've heard that a number of recently in the last couple of years from folks. And I think what that's about is saying that in order to get your foot in the door, or at least to get a first angel investment of a modest amount, you don't need to have that formal business plan written all the way out, the 20, 25-page thing. And this is kind of what people say is happening down in Silicon Valley, that you don't need the plan to get your foot in the door. But we sat here and heard these angels respond to it, especially Gary Rittner from Puget Sound Venture Club, and says, if you don't have a business plan, it's a non-starter. You won't even get to first base. So remember, so that's why I'm trying to make the point, business plan can mean different things to different people. So don't assume that when you say that word or that phrase or when you hear it, that you're on the same page. That's all that's about.
Yeah, and just a comment on, there is a lot of hype going on in Silicon Valley now, and here also you hear these stories that are just amazing. These companies got funded with just an idea. In fact, the best presentation that I was ever part of had 2 slides on it, and that certainly is not a business plan. It was TGIC. How many people here know what TGIC is? I'm just curious. Of course, and TGIC was a great success. Oh yeah, and it was a cool company. It was the first predictive text algorithm that you didn't have to hit the ABC. Or actually, ABC didn't have a number on it. I mean, the 1 didn't have it. You didn't. When you hit 2, it knew whether it was an A, a B, or a C. And it would spell the whole thing. GHI was the 4 key, but it didn't know if it was only 1 letter, it was going to be an I. Amazingly simple idea. There was quite a complex business plan behind it. The way we got it funded was we put 1 slide up that said the number 632 million, and the other slide had $1. So we had 632 million phones were going to be manufactured in the year 2003 that could use TGIC, and we're going to get $1 a phone. $632 million a year of revenue was enough to get a venture capitalist all excited. But they did not write the check till they saw the whole business plan. Right. So
that understand the difference.
Yeah.
So did Bill make that presentation?
No, that was Bob Hart actually came out, and I coached him. I had to get rid of 28 slides to get it down to that those 2. Those of you know Bob.
All right, so here's a key slide that I want to talk a little bit about, and it's what I call the business plan platform. Now, the blue box at the top is where all the thinking happens. This is where you strategize about what your product is, how you're going to get it to market, who your team is, how all these components that we're going to talk about as we go on with this presentation tonight. But that's the essence, that's the thinking. I always tell my clients and people that I make presentations to, do the thinking first before you ever write anything down. And that's what that's all about. That's where you should spend a lot of time making sure you work out the kinks and you got it all so it works together. But then when you're ready to express all that information about your business into formal documents, these are the 4 key documents. There's the executive summary, which is typical, and I've got another, next slide, we'll talk more about this. There's the investor presentation, there's the slide decks, there's the formal business plan, and finally there's the financial projections, the spreadsheet with your profit and loss statement. And typically a summary of those is used in each of these 3 documents. So Again, the executive summary really should be no more than 2 pages. There's a reason it's called a summary. Keep it short. And there's a reason they call executives. We got the word executive in there because of the short attention span that many executives have. If you can get it on 1 page, it's even better. And in fact, many, if you're seeking angel funding, almost all, at least most of the angel groups here in the Puget Sound area use a format that's on the website called gust.com. Anybody familiar with that? Well, once you start to apply to an angel group for funding, they're going to say, put your executive summary in that particular format. And that's a 1-pager. And that's often used during pitches. And again, the purpose of the executive summary is, like Tom said, is to attract attention. It's to get somebody interested in your idea, so they want to have another meeting with you, or they want to dig deeper, they want to get into that due diligence. The slide presentation, your investor presentation, typically 10 or 15 slides, and this is more a sales kind of thing where you're pitching, typically in front of a group, or it could be one-on-one with a potential investor or somebody else that you need to show your business plan to. And those are slides that you flip through and tell your story, hopefully in 5 or 10 minutes. Your business plan is something that you leave behind or send when they want more details, and they can read. But just remember, when we go back to this previous slide, all these 3 documents are embodying the same information. They're just in different structures for different purposes.
Yeah, I'm going to quibble a little bit
Go ahead.
with that, because I think that the executive summary and the business plan have to really tie together, and oh my gosh, make sure those financial projections are the same underlying financial projections, and the summary is the same summary that goes into all of them. Yeah. Or else you will be hoisted by your own petard, which is an old sailing expression. That means you clip the flag halyard onto your belt, basically, and pull yourself up. You've caused the whole embarrassing scene yourself.
You don't want that to happen.
Right, right. But on that investor presentation, I find it useful to make sure you distill the exciting part of your business, the customer exciting part, the part that really will grab the customers and is the reason you're going to be a success, is because customers are going to love you. And really try to distill that into something grabby that the potential investor can really relate to and think about. And therefore, it may not be included in the rest of them.
Absolutely. Right. And finally, the projections, your monthly profit and loss statement for, I recommend 5 years. And the purpose, and I say this a little later when we talk more about projections, the purpose of financial projections is not to predict the future, because you're almost always wrong when you try to do this. Several purposes reasons investors want to see this is, number one, is they want to find out if you know the key financial metrics, the key levers, the drivers that for your type of business. What really makes the difference? What are the, is it cost of goods? Is it cost of customer acquisition? Or inventory turn? What are the business or the financial metrics that are the key drivers for your business? And secondly, they also want to see if you have the ability to plan. Can you think things out in advance and make a logical, coherent plan about how the money's going to come in and how it'll be spent? That's really what it's all about.
So we have a section later on financial projections, right? So I'll save my comment
on there. Okay,
yeah.
all right. Right. Okay, now the title of our talk today was creating a successful business plan for your startup. All right. Well, most of our talk is going to be about business plans, but when I was putting these slides together, I said, "Oops, well, we better be clear about what we mean by success." So having done this for a number of years, I've heard lots of different stories about how people define success at writing a business plan. So number one, and I hear this a lot, I finally got it done.
Yeah, I think that's a great one.
Yeah, people can relate to that. Yeah. And I want to emphasize this. If you're in the process of putting a business plan together for your startup, cogitate, ruminate, figure it out, but then just do it and move forward, because the plan is not the business. And so and in fact, this could be your measure of success. You finally got it done. Secondly, my friends and family like it. Or the best one I got was, well, I want to impress my girlfriend. That was but that could be.
It could have been a boyfriend.
It could be too.
Right.
So,
or yeah,
whomever,
right.
Or your mother. I've heard that one too.
There you go.
But be clear about what your criteria for success is. Maybe that's it, and that's okay. Just be clear. Finally, it's readable and understandable, because I've seen people with a mass of papers, and they've got all of the information there, but you just can't wade your way through it and figure out what the hell's going on. And so for them, a measure of success is they've been able to organize it and make it readable and understandable. I can use it to operate my business. Not all business plans are created for the purpose of raising money, although that's a lot of what happens in this arena. Mm-hmm. But sometimes an existing business or even a startup doesn't need funding. They've already got funding. They want a plan to be able to operate the business. That's why it's called a plan. And you'll have more emphasis in that type of business plan on the operational aspects of a business. All right. It won the business plan competition. Again, or got a grade on my, from my professor. That's another valid reason for having success at a business plan. But the final two are really more where real life comes into play, and that's I got a small business loan. From a bank. Anybody ever here applied for a small business loan from a bank? Did you have to have a business plan? Yeah, you bet you do. It's required. And it's also, like we said earlier, it's pretty much required for getting any traction with investors. Yeah. So anyway, those are various levels or criteria for success. We're going to focus on really the last one, because we're all about high startups typically need to get funded not from banks but from investors.
So there's one that you left out,
okay,
which happened to me. I was in between jobs, so I was frantically trying to start a company to raise money in time just before I ran out of money. And it was close. This is a company called MetaWave, and I was camping out at US West New Vector, and it was a smart antenna company. We were trying to take technology they developed but couldn't commercialize and make a company out of it. And the head of research, who had invented all this stuff, was Dr. Rudink, and a guy named Mike Cavanaugh was his secretary. He was his assistant. And Mike was the chief scribe and driver. Mike, incidentally, is a very successful entrepreneur. He's built a big company and sold it, and he's gone on from here. But while we were doing it, I was the thinking part and trying to put it together. Doug was off inventing products, and Mike was trying to organize and write it all. And we did one section after another. It was kind of cool. He'd say, all right, we've got to do the product stuff, and I'd work like mad all night long writing the product up, and he'd get it formatted and everything. And then finally we did financial projections. It was ludicrous trying to remember how to do this myself. And then we got to marketing. And our whole goal was to try to get 2 phone companies to use these smart antennas, and we're going to be rich. And I said, Mike, we don't have to have a marketing section. We know the customers, we're calling on it. We don't need that section. And I was really busy. And he goes, no, we have to have it. We have to have it. And if I said, why do we have to have it? He goes, well, that's the next part of my course. So he'd been writing his business plan, our business plan, to pass his MBA program. So you don't have that up there.
Right.
You might have to do it for a course.
Right.
No, anyway.
Okay, so now we're going to jump in and the meat of what's in a business plan. So I created these 8 sections that are pretty typical. You may have additional ones, or you may put them in different order. Maybe. I really think you should start with the problem and solution, because that's the foundation for the business. And let's jump right into that. So this is where this can be where your business plan, this is the make or break stage for many business plans. That if you can clearly and succinctly state what the problem is and what your solution is, you're really halfway home. This is also like what Tom said earlier, this is where you can talk about the significant customer benefits and use a customer scenario, tell a story, tell why customers are really going to love this. And one of the things I recommend you avoid is this solution in search of a problem. That often happens when somebody invents a new technology or a new combination of technologies, and it's really cool and it works, but it's not really solving any problem. We see that a lot.
So the worst so there's two sins that get committed on this section. The first is it doesn't show up first. I hate listening to presentations or reading business plans where they haven't put the problem and the solution up first. I can't stand sitting there waiting for them to tell me what they're actually going to do. I don't ever walk out, but oh my gosh, I really want to. The second problem that happens is they spend forever describing the size of a market. That's without, and they will describe actual solutions sometimes without the problem defined in any ways. And that drives me equally batty. So somehow you've got to, I think you, Bryan, put it just right. A problem and a solution all in one pithy, grab them by the throat statement that gets their attention. And that is really hard to do.
It can be the most challenging part of conceptualizing your business. So don't skimp on this. And the other key thing here that you see sometimes is somebody will maybe explain a good problem, but then they'll ramble on about the solution, and you just can't follow what in the world are they really trying to do. You have to simplify it and make it really understandable so that someone, and that's the next tip here, is test your problem solution statement with people who are not familiar with your business sector. Because if they don't understand it, you've got a problem. You need to go back to the drawing board and really find the language or the concepts to explain your problem and solution so that people can understand it. All right, then once you've laid the foundation for the problem and solution, then you look at what's the market size. So these are back to your customers, the customers who have the problem. And you want to do some research and talk about the number of potential customers. That 632 million phones is what we're talking about here. The dollars that are spent already in the marketplace on the kind of solutions for the problem that you're going to solve better, faster, cheaper somehow. Total available market is another good metric you can use here. It's about how many people, it's what's the size of the market you can reach based on your marketing methods and the way you're going to enter the market. Market trends are very important because investors really like rapidly growing markets. There's a number of reasons for that, but one of the best is that as a startup, if you're entering a rapidly growing market and you make a mistake or you realize that your solution is not quite right, you need to retool it, well, there's more customers coming online every day, and so you can pivot your business model or retool your product and get back out there, and you'll still be plenty of opportunity to gain market share.
And the rapidly growing market means you're not growing by stealing customers from an entrenched competitor. You don't have to. You'd like to, that's fine, you can do that, but you don't have to do it right out of the gate.
Right, so the smartphone adoption in the last several years is a good example of a rapidly growing market.
So the most common mistake I see here is that the description of the problem and the solution frequently does not relate to the noses they've counted in the market. A typical, I see a lot of mobile and wireless startup companies. Wireless is the arcane technology that makes mobile work. Mobile is typically the things you can do with a mobile phone. And they will quote how big the mobile market is to me. That's like saying, I used to ask audiences, how many people here have a cell phone on their belt or in their purse or in their pocket? And you get hands raised and you say, hey, it's really catching on. Then I started asking, how many people don't have a cell phone in their pocket? And you know, you'd get more hands raised if you said, "How many people here aren't wearing underwear?" Right? I mean, I'm not going to ask that. Don't worry. But too much information. But you know, seriously, you frequently find out that they haven't really thought about their solution to their problem in terms of who really wants that and how many are there. You know, they'll end up coming with a solution that they really haven't thought through who's going to buy it and who it benefits, because they'll come up with a market that has almost nothing to do with their solution. And sometimes when you really force the issue and count the noses of the target customers for their solution, you'll find out it's not worth doing the business. Mm-hmm. And that's maybe why they didn't want to look at that so carefully.
So, and here's a couple of tips. Sometimes you get out there and you do your market research as a startup. You don't have a lot of money to spend on these expensive research reports. Well, learn guerrilla market research. And we don't have time to go into that tonight, but the Northwest Entrepreneur Network has a great EIQ program that's put on by Therese Adelhawk-Smith about 3 times a year. Huh. And it's all about low-cost market research techniques. And it's good information. Also, another tip is don't say this phrase, if we can capture just 1% of this market.
I can't tell you how many times yeah, okay, right. If you could.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
You know, if pigs could fly, we'd all need umbrellas.
Right.
That was an expression. Sorry.
You need to build the business model from the ground up, from the bottom up, showing how you are going to capture each one of those customers.
Right.
Not just if we can get 1%, then we're successful. Right. Because that 1% can be really hard to do.
Yeah.
Can we back up to avoid the solution in search of a problem? What if?
Well, we're going to try to save questions for the end.
I don't know why we were told to do that, but it seemed like a really strong instruction that we're supposed to follow. Didn't you notice that?
What do you think, Dave?
I'll wait.
Well, we'll kind of go kind of fast to get through this, so save your question, all right? I know there'll be a lot of good questions.
Oh,
so
I see. I just figured out why. I've just got. We're supposed to be handing the microphone around because we're recording this.
Yes,
and that's why. And they didn't want to run around recording.
Right.
So hold that question. We'll do it at the end.
All right. So the next part I like to see in a business plan is, now that you've talked about your problem solution, the market size, well, then how are you going to make money on each unit that you sell? And that's really, this is just fundamental. What's your unit revenue, cost, your gross margin. Pricing rationale is important sometimes, because if you've got a new product or new service, how do you figure out the price? Well, you ought to have a good rationale of how you've done that, whether you've used a market approach or cost approach or value approach. Those are the 3 common methods for determining price. And this is a good place to also talk about distribution channels and your sales strategy. And again,
how much you're going to have to discount it to the channel,
right,
for example.
Yeah, the discount structure. So a couple of tips here in revenue model is, if you have a complex revenue model that has more than 2 pieces to it, sometimes you can have just 2, but usually you have more, you have lots of players. You want to use a flow chart. It's very useful to have a chart. I did a business plan for a startup company that actually got funded, raised a couple of $1 million, and their revenue model flow chart had about 20 entities on it. Wow. Believe it or not, it was that complex. A lot of influencers of purchase decisions and things like that. And another tip is, know what the normal range of gross margins are in your type of business. Because if the gross margin is a critical metric in the revenue model. And if you say that, if you propose a gross margin of that's way out of whack with what that industry normally has, you're going to be suspect. They're going to be, unless you have a real good reason why you're able to do that.
That's true.
So, I did okay on that one.
Well, no. Actually, I just to let you guys know, this is great stuff, Brian.
Okay.
It really is.
Thank you.
I mean, there isn't a single thing that I sit here and I thought I'd be able to shoot holes in a lot of.
Oh, we're not done yet.
Okay. But no, you're right on. That is exactly the order that I like to see things: problem, solution, how big is the market you're, and then how are you going to make money at it?
Right, and then so if you think about it, the market size kind of derives from the problem side of the equation, and Revenue model is from the solution. That's what you're selling. And so once you've established, you kind of come up a level, once you've established that, you bring these together into your go-to-market strategy. Then how are you going to get this product or service out to the people you're selling it to? Yep. And this is, read bullet number 1, the last 2 words up there, and please take that to heart, because it's such a common first-timer mistake to say that we have 7 revenue streams and we have 8 segments we're going to target when we go to market. And it is so difficult to have 1 revenue stream and 1 target segment to make that work.
Even when you know better, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. I mean, we say pick 1, maybe you have 2, but just don't have a lot, because what that implies is that you're scattered. And you got, and what investors and other supporters of startup businesses want to see is they want to see focus. They want to see that you're focused on getting out there into the market and having a first success, and not scattering your resources on different segments or different streams.
Yeah. And the other thing it shows at the early stages is that you're really not that certain of the one. You really haven't thought through a way to glorious success based on one go-to-market strategy. So you're going to put in others just to make yourself feel better. Well, that's all you'll do is make yourself feel better for a little while. And then you find out that you just can't do more than 1 or 2 at the same time to any degree of effectiveness.
Yeah, it's just you have limited resources in a startup.
And it also means you haven't thought it all the way through to where when you run into a startup company that really knows that they can make money out of a certain problem with a solution to it that they've priced out and is aimed at one segment, they are unshakable in that conviction. And it's kind of awesome when you see that kind of focus and belief in their model.
Yeah, you can tell when you see that, and that's what you should strive for. And here you just talk about what your marketing messaging is and what your activities are going to be, especially any that are unique to your business, that ways you have to reach the market. And pay special attention to this 4th bullet, the cost of customer acquisition, because that will affect your profitability. And and if your cost of customer acquisition is high, maybe in the beginning, be clear about that and say we're going to lose money for a while we're out there capturing market share and getting traction. But just be clear about that, and eventually you want to get to the point where your cost of customer acquisition is significantly lower than your gross margin on a product. And especially for startups, here's a great tip. Find partners and affiliates to boost your early marketing efforts. Cash is scarce in startups, and you don't want to have, so leveraging other partners or affiliates as marketing partners to help you get out there and reach your customers is a very cost-effective way to enter the market. Even though you may get lower revenue because you have to share some with them, but it gets you out there faster and farther with less marketing spend. So,
it's good advice.
Okay.
I mean, there's some businesses that I'll see where they do have a wonderful end customer idea, but the cost of customer acquisition, of marketing, they're fishing in the wrong pond for money. They've got to go out and raise $5 to $10 million, whereas if they actually used a channel to get there, in other words, sold through somebody that has a lot more to gain instantly, they may be able to get by without raising any venture money. They may be able to bootstrap it, or friends and family, and at the end they may make a lot more money because if they've been careful, they have their acquirer all set up. Mm-hmm. Just make sure when you're doing that initial channel decision, remember you're going to be low on money, you're going to feel like you're weak, but that's when you got to be tough at negotiating. And I can't tell you how many times you've seen a potentially very valuable company give it all up at the beginning by signing an exclusive with the one customer, channel customer, that could buy them as a company. And they sign up an exclusive right off the bat, and in the end they have a negotiation that's sort of like, I'm tired, will you buy me? As opposed to, hey, if you don't get your checkbook out, I know someone else who will. Right?
Excellent advice. All right, so now you've come together, you know how you're going to go out there and sell this in the market, and what do you run into when you go out in the market? Competition.
Darn.
Yep. And the goal here is if you can find what is called sustainable competitive advantages for your business. Those are things that your business has that can keep others out, barriers to entry, keep other players out of the market, or that can give you a competitive advantage that will last at least for a period of time. Patents are possibly one area here. If you have intellectual property that you can protect, that's one way to do this. Exclusive contracts. There's lots of ways that you can build this. But when you think about your competition, you have to think, how are you going to differentiate yourself? How are you going to win customers over vis-a-vis the competitors who are also trying to get their dollars? So you focus on what your key differentiators are. And again, this is in your business plan. The competitive part is where you can use charts. There are different kinds of quadrant charts or feature benefit charts that you can use to illustrate how you compare to competitors without a lot of text. And one obvious tip here is, you probably heard this, but maybe some people haven't, never say that you have no competition. Yeah. I still hear that today.
Yeah. I've got to say, I was wondering if that was going to be your tip. I've now finally caught on that he has tips that are covering most of what I have to say. So I'm now waiting for the tip to appear. So. But that is by far the most common thing here. We don't really have any competition, which means to me there is no problem. Or you picked a problem that nobody knows they have. I mean, if there's a real problem, there's going to be competitive ways to solve it. You know, I used to run a business for a company called Raychem, and it was power product. We sold stuff to utilities, and mostly to help them build their networks, cable terminations and splices. It was, and people would occasionally say to me, "And we have no competition," and I'd say, have we sold anything to this particular utility, say Puget Sound or Puget Power, whatever it is, it turns Seattle City Light? We sold anything to them? And they go, well, no. I said, look at it. I see all these lights on. They must be doing something right. Somebody's helping them. Right? Of course there's competition.
Oh, even if the status quo could be your competition. Yeah. You may not have any direct competition, somebody who's doing exactly the same kind of widget that you have, but you always have competition. And it's important to address it completely and straightforwardly in your business plan. And just let me take a moment to say one thing. Don't ever try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes or dissemble or lie or not tell the truth in this whole area, because you only have to get caught once and you're done.
And it's all over.
And you're toast.
It's all over.
And I saw it happen once in a presentation. An entrepreneur up in front of a group about this size, and he tried to lie about it. Somebody asked him a question, and it turns out the guy asking him the question was the top expert in the field. And he just tore him up, and the guy walked away and never heard from him again.
So we're at the point now where iteration really begins to count. So when you get down to this competitive slide, and you're trying to come up with Bryan's sustainable competitive advantage, there are only two ways. The patents build value in your company over the long term. They're really important, don't get me wrong. All of the companies I'm involved with file patents. But they don't protect you at the beginning at all. Right? So you've got two ways to figure out how to have competitive advantage. One is to come up with an absolutely amazing technology or solution that nobody else can possibly replicate. And the second is to do your market segmentation in a way that puts you in a place in the market that is very difficult for someone else to access. And it may be geography, it may be channel, the way you're taking the channels. It may be a particular class of customers that other people haven't figured out. So this is, and if you can't come up with a sustainable competitive advantage, you better go back to the problem solution statement and think about it, or the revenue model and think about it.
Precisely. Yeah. So you see how you start with problem solution, you define your market size, and your revenue model comes together with your go-to-market strategy, And then you're running into your competition. You got to show how you're going to beat the competition out in the marketplace. That's the basis of the thrust of the business model. But there are at least two other important aspects of the business plan, and one of those is the financial projections. This is just the numerical expression of everything you got in these other 5 sections. It's, where does your revenue come from, and what are your expenses in running this company? So as I said earlier, the purpose of the projections, in my opinion, is not to predict the future, but to demonstrate that you know these metrics and that you have the ability to plan, that you can think this through. Another tip for you about when you're building your P&L spreadsheet, a profit and loss spreadsheet, is that you build it from the bottom up. You don't look at the top numbers and say and just apply percentages to them, because when you get into due diligence with an investor, your model will fall apart at that point. They want to know that you've thought this through about how do you get the very first customer, and how does that build? How do you grow from there? Another key question that I get is, well, gosh, how do I know how much we're going to sell? I mean, we're not even in the marketplace. Do we just sort of pull that out of thin air? Well, no. There's a relationship between what you spend on marketing to what your sales should be. Should be a somewhat proportional kind of relationship, so that if you put X number of dollars into your marketing, it should produce a Y amount of sales. And finding those metrics is sometimes difficult, but you can do it. You can figure out, if we put this amount of marketing out there, we'll reach so many customers, and that a certain percentage of them will respond, and you just build the model around that.
So, is there a tip coming up?
Oh, of course.
All right, good. So, show that tip
Okay.
before I comment.
Never say our numbers are conservative, and it's about that one.
I don't know. Sometimes they are. Once in a blue moon, and most people could say it.
Right, yeah.
And I kind of go, yeah, that's cool. But they're usually not conservative.
Right. The point here is that this word is overused. It's
So, yeah.
But you have.
Well, I have on this whole place, this whole financial projection part. How many people think financial projections are exciting? There's
a
our
few.
camera lady thinks so. Yeah, I agree with you. I get all a tizzy waiting for the financial projections. Those of you who didn't raise your hand, you've got to learn to love these things. I absolutely love the financial projections. We get to that part, it's sort of, at this point, I'm kind of going, ooh, I wonder what they're going to be. I wonder sometimes, because I've been built up for this, how incredibly stupid are they going to be? Or far-fetched, or, oh my gosh, I hope they haven't left something out. Or I wonder how ambitious these people are. I wonder what they think is big or not. I wonder what, oh my gosh, and sometimes or maybe it's just, how big could this business be? What's it take to get there? I actually love the financial projection part. And there are a lot of venture capitalists out there, I hate to say this, who only know the financial projection part. And they ratio everything, right? I don't do that. I want to know what the real picture looks like of the business. Now, I was fortunate. I went to what people think is a really good business school. And I look back many times over my career, and I think, what did I learn in that business school? I won't name it because it's not a great story. And it was only one thing, which is there's something called Bayes' theorem, and there's something called Bayesian logic. And if you really distill it down, Bayesian logic says that any guess is better than no guess. And lots of little guesses is better than one big guess. And there's more wisdom in those two little statements than you can imagine. So this is your chance to guess. And lots of times I'll get a guess that you kind of, I've said this to many people. Do you realize that if you hit these numbers, you will have a much more successful business in a shorter period of time than Microsoft? As a matter of fact, this will be the most successful business in the history of the world. And you are presenting it to me. How lucky can I be? And it's true. I've seen many business plans that are the most successful potential business in the history of the world. Well, don't present that unless you've got an idea that is so big you probably haven't come to me. You've already been bought by Google for $1 billion or something. Who knows? And I'm not confusing valuable, successful business. There's no accountant for taste. Companies are getting bought and sold and going public with huge market caps that are based on, I hate to say this, hope and expectations that are beyond any possible real outcome. And I'm not going to name names in that. Those are just my opinions. I'm talking about businesses that have been shown to me that are real revenue, $1 billion. I mean, it's, you know, my gosh, it's like, what was that, Austin Powers? You know, $1 million sometimes. They'll say, we're going to charge him $1 million. Remember when he was holding the world up for ransom? He didn't realize $1 million didn't go quite as far as it used to. Well, sometimes I'll get the numbers and they'll say, hey, we're going to sell $100,000 a year of this. And I go, oh, my heart goes out to them because they've left things out of their financial projections that will be $100,000 a month if they put them in. They're frequently thinking, when I do numbers myself, I've had businesses that I've forgotten something about when I'm doing the financial projections. I've forgotten to put rent in. Or I forgot, oh my gosh, we've got the legal expenses and all this and all. By the time you add it up, you realize I actually do have to raise a lot of money for this. And I'm sorry, it's just not worth it. You know, because the business isn't that kind of a business. So this part is really important, and just know that you may find somebody on the other side of those financial projections that is sitting there eager to see what you've thought, as opposed to just, let's fill the forms out.
Very well put.
All right.
It all comes down to being reasonable with I would say reasonable with a dash of passion and optimism about what you're doing.
I just give you little things that we look at. How many people, as a percentage of your current employment, do you think you can hire in a business per year? Right? I'm just curious. How many people here think that you can double, say once you're up to 20 or 30 people, that you can double your head count every year? How many people think you can do that? Right? There, right? You know, how many people think that that number is difficult to achieve and high? So there's well, that is the damn issue. How about adding motivated employees on top of it? You know, you may have a cookie cutter business that you can go out and hire a lot of people because you figured a formula out. Maybe you've got a great pizza chain and you think you can get people that can make pizza. I bet you cannot do more than about double the size of your employee group each year, because pretty soon you're going to hire bad pizza makers. And your whole chain is going to go down because it made bad pizzas. You know, so there's just certain limits that you just can't grow faster than. You know, you can't. Good people is the key, though. But that's one metric you look at it. Mm-hmm. You know, it turns out that doubling every year for a business is doubling the employee base. You might be tripling the size of the business. Oh my gosh, that's plenty big enough. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah, that's rapid growth.
Yeah.
So back to this phrase conservative. I've got my next slide is. So can everybody read this? Is it okay? So that's the first slide. Realistic or optimistic, and then Dilbert responds. And the final slide here is. I love this one when I saw the paper. Because I knew I could use this one. The point here is that all these words, these adjectives, are qualitative, and that what it really comes down to is the numbers themselves, because they're not qualitative, they're quantitative.
So I'd like to comment on this, because this is really tough, right? So I've had several of those companies that were going to be the most successful businesses in the history of the world have come to me, and when I say, oh, wow, most successful business in the history of the world, how lucky, they go, well, we know they're a little optimistic, but you're going to cut them in half anyway. You know, I said, all right, so you're going to be the second most successful company in the history of the world. I mean, you know, this is such a hard thing to gauge, right? So So when you go in there, you're all convinced that venture capitalists have a pair of scissors that they're going to cut your projections in half. No, we don't. Right? That is so ridiculous to think that you're going to come in and automatically be discounted. Right? If you believe that, you probably will be. You'll be so discounted, you'll be shown the door. All right? So don't just do your best to come up with what you really think you're going to do. And then guess what? If it's not a very exciting business, after you put down what you really think you're going to do, maybe you should change what your business is. Or maybe you should change what your expectations are. Or better yet, it's probably plenty good enough as a business, change who you're raising money from. You know, but don't change the numbers to fit who you're raising money from. Don't do that. Don't try to second guess us. We're not smart enough about your business and what to do, but we are smart enough about knowing when we're getting buzzed, right? So just do what you think, write down what you think you're actually going to do.
Okay, and then management team. Again, most investors will tell you this is the most important part of your business. Who, like you said, you walk in a room and want to know who is doing this, and so you might think, well, this is kind of a catch-22 as a first-time entrepreneur. You don't have the great track record of 3 successful startups. So, so that's where team building comes in, to go out and find other people who've got a track record or at least some passion and the skills to really pull together the team that's cohesive. It's okay to have some open positions, because if you're raising money, you might use some of the proceeds of the funds to hire a VP of sales or something like that. But my tip here is actually one of the most important ones of the whole evening, and that is to recruit a competent board of advisors. There is no substitute for a first-time entrepreneur who's doing a startup business to get this board of advisors. How many people here know what this concept is? I mean, if you don't, I should probably do a whole, something about how to recruit board of advisors, because it is so critical. You can go out and get prominent people with success and pedigrees and the right kind of resumes to advise your little startup. Now, a lot of people, especially when you're starting out, you think, well, why would somebody important want to help little old me when I'm just starting out? And there's a secret here, because it's part of what Tom said earlier. You've got something that a lot of people don't have. You've got passion. You've got an idea. How many people have an idea for a business that just won't let go of you, right?
Cool.
Cool. That's what so many other people outside of this room don't have. And you've got that passion, you've got that dream. And I encourage you to get that into your blood and get it into your confidence, so that you can go out and recruit advisors, people successful business people, or academics, or researchers, or technologists, or other people who could really give you good advice about how to get your startup off the ground. It's easier to do than you might think.
That is fantastic advice, Brian. It really is. A long while ago, I watched a John Cleese management training movie, believe it or not. And it was all about what motivates people. This was early in my career. It was a real movie. It wasn't a video. We didn't have those. Right? So, I won't go through the whole thing, but it was fascinating. In the end, the only thing that motivates people is feeling useful. That's it. Feeling useful. And that is incidentally, my contribution to society, I think, is to give as many people as I possibly can to help give them the opportunity to feel useful. And there's nothing more useful feeling than starting a successful small business. And the people that Brian's talking about that are advisors, they want to feel useful also. So helping somebody with a passion for creating a business it's such a kick. It makes it feel so useful when that company's going off into some degree of success that people sign up for it all the time.
And you actually get good advice, too. Yeah. And not only advice, but you get contacts. Yep. Advisors will open doors for you and make introductions to all kinds of people who can help you. You'll get support. They'll tell you about free or resources you can get that you maybe didn't know. And the kind of support and advice and context that you could get from advisors is invaluable. So really learn how to do that and go out and recruit the best board you can.
Yeah.
And you get a big boost to your management credibility by having a board of advisors, just by having one, regardless of who's on it. but if you're able to recruit some impressive people, you get it can really help with this management, your management credibility. Because an investor or a banker will look at you and say, look at your board of advisors and maybe recognize one or two of the names, or at least see the resumes and say, and we'll think, all right, well, this entrepreneur, even though they don't have the experience themselves, they've been able to go out there in the community and convince important people to help them. All right, all of a sudden you're up a couple of notches in their view.
Yeah, I want to comment on the general misperceptions around that management team. So, Bryan, you said the management's the most important part of the business. I think it's one of the parts of the business, right? So there's sort of a gradation of potential investors around the management team issue. One extreme is there's some investors that will back only successful entrepreneurs, need not be desperate and poor to apply, right? So they will back repeat successful entrepreneurs over and over. And whenever I hear that, I think of something I learned in one of my, I can't remember if it was engineering school or grad school, where some guy was in a behavioral science course, and some guy took a bunch of pigeons and put them in a warehouse, and they fed them, they watered, and they had clean cages, and he left them there for 30 days, 30 nights, and he had random food pellets arrive. So the food pellets would come down and hit the floor of the cage at random moments, random number generator. And he came back after 30 days, and all the pigeons had figured out what made the food pellets arrive. Some were spinning around to the right, some were on the left, some were flapping their wings, others were pecking the floor. They'd all figured out what kept those food pellets coming. And that's a little bit like repeat entrepreneurs. I'm sorry.
That's great.
A lot of the times we're just lucky, and we got food pellets, and they worked. And when you repeat that pecking in the wrong business, it should have been wing flapping. It doesn't work. So I don't back a management team. Oh, great! Here's a cool management team. Let's see if we can figure something out for them to do. I don't like that. The other extreme is that, oh, it's a really cool idea. I think I'll tell them to leave and hire my own team. Oh my God. Those people are private equity. They're sleazy. They're the wrong people. I'm sorry if there are any of them, if you ever meet any of them. But I am kind of in the middle where I go, oh, I really want a good idea. I want a good problem to go solve. I don't have to have the perfect solution, but I really want to hear a good problem to solve. Ooh, that's a really interesting problem. And then I'd like to have a pretty good solution. And then I'd love to have someone who's passionate, that's leading the charge, and I ask a question. And here I'm going to give you the answers to it. You ready? So when I get a passionate entrepreneur pitching me the question, a great problem to solve with a good solution, I ask him or her, so do you really want to be CEO? And I used to think that the following answer was a good one. Well, I'm doing all right now, but believe me, I'll be the first to know when I'm not, and I'll be glad to bring in someone who's better than I am. Bullshit, right? Excuse me, is this really being baloney? I'm sorry, they're usually the last to know, and they will not be happy. There's only two valid answers to the question, so you want to be CEO. And that is, oh, duh. Why do you think I'm doing this? Of course I do. And the second one is, oh my God, I have to do it for now. Do you know someone better? Yeah, and those two are great answers. I can deal with them. I may not say, okay, I'll back you. You really want to be CEO, but at least I know where you stand. Right? Now, right after that, oh my gosh, this is John. He's in charge of marketing. And I go, well, but you don't have a product yet. Right? What are you hiring a marketing person for? And the answer is usually, well, he's my brother-in-law, right. Or he's my next-door neighbor, and he's really cool. He lent me his lawnmower. Or you really dig in. You find an answer like that. Or it's even worse. You get somebody who this is our CFO, and you go, but he's never done any CFO jobs or controller jobs or treasury jobs or anything. Why do you want him as your CFO? And the answer is, well, he's my brother-in-law, or I borrowed the lawnmower from him. I mean, you find frequently that you've got people solidly in jobs that either you don't need or are completely the wrong people at the beginning. I'd much rather deal with a leader and maybe one technical partner or one sales partner if they're technical that are really trying to build a company and then help them bring in the right people to build it than I would a complete team.
Excellent. Okay, so finally, the last part of your business plan is the conclusion. And again, a conclusion, like any story, there has to be an ending. You don't want to just leave them hanging. You have to make the ask. And that's typically for an investment. You want to talk about how much you're raising, what your valuation is, what you're using the funds for, your milestones. For loans, you'd want to, very similar, just what are the deal terms and how you're going to repay it. But it's important, especially when you're doing the pitch. This is a chance where you can, bring the energy of your presentation to a close and, reach a climax and get the audience excited because you want this money because you're going to go out and do these things. So.
Yeah, how many people here pitch the Alliance of Angels? Has anyone pitched it here? They're a really well-organized group here, and they go through a lot of formal stuff, and they always make you put your valuation. They say you have to put your valuation down, and I used to think that's terrible. Let the market set it, let it float up and down depending on demand. And I tend to think now that a better way to do it is you've probably raised money from someone else already. You've brought money in as a bridge. They have expectation. State what you want, and then let us negotiate around it if we don't like it.
Just remember, valuation is always negotiable.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I'm just jumping in here because there's a lot of people that say don't put the valuation down. So, but the amount of money you're looking for is really important.
Yeah.
And then you usually get a question, why? And you go back to the financial projections.
Okay, so now we're ready for some Q&A. And Dave, you got a microphone for anybody? Let's on site. So why don't we start with you over here? You had a question about the problem solution before. There's your mic over here.
When you're asking the question, please hold the microphone
right up to your mouth.
Okay, so you mentioned, make sure we pick one problem for our solution, maybe two. What if it's something like, I'll go with an example like QR codes, right? Or the Microsoft tags, they're the little, and those are used for, a dozen to 2 dozen different things. How do you, if you're pitching QR codes, how do you say, well, it's going to be a marketing thing, or it's going to be, how do you find that one problem if your solution might be for multiple problems?
So, go ahead.
Well,
he didn't say multiple problems.
Yeah, right? just in general, about the segment you're going to target first, it's your go-to-market strategy. It's where you're going to start. Yeah. That's what we're talking about, your initial segment that you target. So when the QR codes were introduced, I don't know the story about that, they probably had 1 or 2 places they were going to start to get a foothold in the marketplace. And they knew there are going to be dozens of other uses. So you can mention those, but you want to focus on where you're going to start.
Do I mention them in the executive summary? In the executive summary, I focus on.
Depends on what you're going to do with QR codes. So when you say QR codes, I go, all right, they've been invented. Yeah. You're not going to.
I'm not doing QR codes.
Well, that's just an example.
No, darn.
But
so is anyone else doing QR codes? Because that's really.
No, I think your question is, how do you find the balance between your initial segment and the potential other segments?
Exactly.
Focus, put your emphasis on your initial segment. Okay. Just mention the others.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. I was hoping to dig into QR codes. I just learned something about them.
Okay. Do we have a question on this side of the room? Okay.
So, okay. So in the let's say in the case where you're doing kind of lean startup method and you discover that your execution plan doesn't really work with the initial market that you're going after, does it make more sense to reshift the market or shift the execution plan, or does that really depend?
Depends.
It really depends. You know, one of the that's incidentally a good book. I think the notion of trying and experimentation and adjustment and learning is really important. It's particularly suited for an internet-centric enterprise. You don't get many do-overs when you're trying to open up a new restaurant. You know, you do get a do-over, but it's kind of complete and total, right?
Expensive.
Yeah, and you know, you start over again completely. But within, say, a restaurant, and I pick a restaurant because I get to deal with the deals I look for. Incidentally, are all winner take all. Switzerland plays. They're massive markets. There's a chance for a startup to win it all because the right kind of solution or the right kind of problem might win it all. And Switzerland means the big guys will get in each other's way and let a little startup sneak along. But most of the world isn't doing that. Most of the world is trying to start smaller businesses that might make them really happy because they'll feel useful and incidentally in the long run make them way more money than the odds of trying to do one of these big ones will play out to. But that lean startup is, I don't know, how many people have read that book, Lean Startup? So a few. It's one of the few books that actually, I get given books all the time. I don't know how I learn anything because I never read them. But this one, I did read most of it. So, and it's all about experimentation, adjustment, learning from the market, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So you really have to do that. But it depends, as Bryan said, on each business, how much of that you can do.
So do you have a board of advisors?
I was actually gonna ask about that. What stage is that necessary?
Now.
Is that like right now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how would you respond to the topic of founder remuneration within the business plan? Do you prefer to see someone who's taking no salary, rice and bean salary, or something a little more market equivalent, or do you not care?
Oh, I care a lot. All right, I care a lot. Can I answer that one?
Please do.
Because you
No, go right
have to
ahead.
deal with how they're going to say
You
what they
do.
want to do. Yeah. You know, when I made the comment of only rich people need apply, you know, come on. Most people who have great startup ideas aren't rich yet. I mean, most people have ideas are just trying to get their first one to work. That's the vast majority of people. So I don't expect people to come in wealthy and work forever with no salary. I just, you know, I'll miss some of the greatest ideas ever if I were to say, you know, I'm sorry, there's no salary here, right? They usually have been working for no salary. Now, if they come in on the other extreme, so I don't expect zero. I have one deal that I'm in now where the founder and the CEO, and of course myself, I'm chairman of this company, and I hardly ever get paid anything to be chairman, but normally they'd be taking some money out. They've just raised $3 million, and they're not. Neither of them are paying themselves. And the reason they're not paying themselves is they've figured out that their stock is going to be worth so much more if they can avoid raising more money before they have the proof of concept out there that is working, that they are willingly pushing it off. Now, guess what? They both can afford to. If they couldn't afford to, I'd expect them to be taking some money out. But out of the other extreme is if I run into somebody who's trying to raise money from people that I'm trying to help put the money in, and the second they do it, they want to make $200,000 a year on a business that's not going to have revenue for 2 or 3 years, and that's their meal ticket, I kind of go, I'm sorry. That's not what I'm in the business of doing. I'd like to, and I pick that number as a CEO type compensation as a startup. I'd rather see somebody that's willing to take, you know, half what they might get on the market because they need the money. They need the rice and beans for a larger family, or they have obligations up and down the generational gap. Who knows what? There's no dishonor in needing money, right? But I don't like to see people trying to get rich before they've got revenue. That's
Excellent,
sort of,
excellent.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm going to stand up because the monitor's
Sure,
kind of
sure. Yeah.
between us. In an experimentation-driven business plan, much like a lean
Yeah.
startup in nature, when you're describing your revenue model, do you advise explaining contingencies based on the outcome of experiments? Like how far down the rabbit hole do you want to know the market hypotheses?
That's a great. That's funny. That's one that you could probably answer because you have to write the rabbit hole, right?
Well, I would say while you're still in the experimentation phase, you're maybe not ready to complete your business plan. That's would be my first thought. That you know, is the experiment, if the experimentation is it more akin to the R&D work where you're,
No,
or is it market?
confirmation of market tests.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I can answer that. What I'd like to see is I have multiple companies that are in this experimentation phase, if you call it. I mean, we have products. I use a real life example. Have people here heard of a company called Influence? I'm just curious. Has anyone heard of Influence? So we got one person in the back. So it's not as famous as I thought it was. It's a brand new startup, and we have a very cool app that we're using to understand what people are really driven by. It's a way to express what you want out of the market in terms of advertising and deals anonymously. And we really don't know whether people really care that much about being anonymous. We do know they care about certain aspects of privacy, but we don't really know which ones those are. And we do think they want stuff that they want, but we don't know how much they really want stuff that they want. So we decided to put an app out there and really work it hard to find that out. Now in the business plan, we say we're launching this app. We don't expect to make a lot of revenue off it, but we're going to learn a ton, and then we're going to feed that back into a channel strategy where we help large companies understand what their customers want without their customers feeling exposed. But we very clearly say we're in a learning phase, and this is a list of the things that we're going to learn, and some of them are very generic, like what do the customers really want in terms of privacy. So I'd recommend that if you have a bunch of unknowns where you need customer feedback, I think you get more credit for stating that you don't know what the customer wants. I long ago gave up predicting what customers want. I mean, I could get it right down to wish I were younger, mid-60-year-old sailors, and I still wouldn't hit the market, right?
Just to reiterate, a great question. There's also no substitute for talking to customers early on and finding out what makes them tick and finding out what they think of your product or service, and would they buy it? How much would they pay? How important is it to them? Get out there and get some of that direct feedback, as much of it as you can.
Thank you. In a business plan, to what extent, and this is not something that was covered in your presentation, are you interested in, but it does relate very much to the planning aspect of things and thinking things through. Are you interested in looking at or seeing risk analysis and potential mitigation or contingency plans for thinking through various scenarios as the business might develop?
You didn't have that. You didn't have that as a section.
No, it's an excellent question.
It is, yeah.
My personal philosophy is to not pay much attention to any risk. If there are obvious, no, because
I'm glad you told me that.
Well, no, here's the thing. If there are obvious risks that an ordinary person who read the plan or heard your pitch would say, well, you've got a big risk here, then I think you need to address it. But I don't think you need to get down to a lot of details about all the things that could go wrong. Am I understanding your question correctly?
Yeah. So you're not a lawyer, are you? I'm serious. Are you a lawyer?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm very passionate about preventing problems rather than having to solve
Well,
them later.
so the reason I ask that question is that if you get into risks, so let me make an overall arching statement about the last question on experimentation. there's nothing that quite replaces getting an order. When you're in all of this business planning mode and you're out exploring the market, it is not infrequent if you have a really good problem to solve with a great solution for you to stumble on an order up front. If you get enough of those, I just keep solving that problem, delivering that solution, and let that business plan evolve over time until where you're reaching a point where you are required to get that business plan done. Now, one of the requirements may be you want to grow, and things are falling off the Jeep all over the place, right? You just don't know, oh my gosh, I'm out of control. That's a good reason to write it down. But when you're out there getting that feedback, if the feedback comes in the form of a purchase order, and you can deliver that solution, oh my gosh, start doing that. All right, there's no substitute for that. And all of a sudden, you're sitting at home writing up that list of risks, becomes a little less important to you. And it becomes a whole lot less important to the people you're pitching. So when you come in with obviously a really great problem to solve, with a really cool solution, and customers are buying it, you kind of go, okay, what's the risk? The risk is Microsoft will suck it into their OS. That used to be the standard risk around here, right?
Seen it happen.
Yeah, the other risk is right now Google will give it away free. All right, those are the two biggest risks in the technology world, right? Or Amazon will crush your margins. For those of you Amazonians in the room, or own the world, or so there's all these big, huge competitive risks. You probably should address some of those. The giving it away free, the sucking into the OS is a really risk that you better talk about. I might get hit by a car when I walk out the door tomorrow is not. Right? But when you get into the lawyers have to list everything. These are the risks. Oh, we forgot the car one. That's not going to add any value.
Well, I agree. There has to be balance.
It's a balance,
Yeah, yeah.
balancing act. And if you have too many obvious risks to the business, then you might want to rethink. You might ask the question: is it really worth doing this? If there are real and substantial risks that you can't manage. Just in my experience, and maybe you can echo this too, Tom, but when you're pitching for money to investors, you don't look very much at the downside. I mean, everybody knows there's so many things that can go wrong in a business.
Usually everything. Right?
Yeah, usually, right. But it's more an optimistic, this is how we're going to do it and conquer the world, and you focus on the positive.
Yeah. I think it's true. I do like to hear somebody talk about these are the competitive threats and what we're going to counter. Maybe that's a good way to segment it. There are some risks in certain businesses, like because the problem is temporary. So every now and then I'll see a business solution to a problem that you kind of go, that's not going to last. That's a big risk. So and I'll probably point it out if I know anything about your business, which is always a flip of a coin. But you got to, if you find one of those, the problem could go away if they just fixed it. A standard, a long while people were worried about how to get stuff on eBay, this makes it a lot less cumbersome. They're form fillers. People are going to, the digital wallets where you're going to be able to onboard on the different websites a lot easier. And I've invested in one of those. We had to get out of that business because everyone can figure out how to get their front end on a website working better. So that problem is kind of going to go away. There's another problem going to go away in payments. So anyway.
This one?
Could you go over more about what you were talking about, finding partners and affiliates to boost early sales, and then the other issue, being tough on negotiating at the beginning? Because if you find partners, aren't you just helping them do what you're planning on doing?
If you had the right partner, it's funny. That's one where we've used the word partners, and you could say distributors.
Right.
You could say channels, and that begins to get more granular. You've just used the word partners as competitors.
Right.
I don't usually think of competitors as partners. So yeah, you don't want to go to your competitor who's got a solution just like yours and say, would you sell ours? Especially if they want an exclusive. You know? So, you know, I think every time you have let's think of them as distribution partners or distribution channels, resellers, OEMing the product. You get into OEMing the product, that means that you're building it, they're putting their name on it. Wow, that's given up a lot of value in your company to get some short-term return. Depending on the market, it may be impossible to do anything else. You know, I'm in businesses where the decision it used to be, now they've been bought, who knows what'll happen, but you always came into the decision, do you have to OEM Motorola, right? So if this ever happens to you, the answer is eventually yes. You have to try. And the result will almost certainly be negative. I don't want to pick on Motorola, but in my business, that was always the case. And we always vote, I make sure that we all agree that we're all going to do this, OEM Motorola. Because gosh, it was huge. If it really took off, we'd be rich, you know. And then we try to negotiate the contract in a way that they're not the exclusive. They try and carve it in, and then it never works out for some reason. So all I worry about when that decision is made is how to make sure nobody blames everyone, each other. How do you survive the bad decision, right? And which is a lot about the art of being in a startup. Is how do you survive the mistakes you make, right? But you have to pick your channel partners as a real. They have to have some value add to it, which is customer acquisition, distribution, and you have to be careful at the beginning to not give them exclusives. That's what it boils down to. And don't give them all your profits either, or else you'll never grow. And when you're desperate and looking for that first customer, it's really hard to be tough. So just practice in front of the mirror. Go in there and smile and be tough.
Or get some advice.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I help companies, a number of companies a lot. If I really boil down to what I do, I'm the source of no panic. You know, I kind of, a lot of my usefulness is I don't panic very easily. I throw up in secret, in other words. But the other thing I do is on negotiations. I frequently am there going, no, you just can't do that right away. I know it. Let's think about how we're going to walk away. So I'll probably help someone out more by deciding how not to close the deal, and the life will go on. That's where the no panic stuff comes in. And then frequently you can end up with a good deal. You know? But you got to be tough. You got to really remember that winning certain battles just aren't worth it. You know, I got that customer, and then I found out I have no money for the rest of my life, and I'm working, for that no money is no good, right? No, so we're not calling the shots on who gets to ask the question.
So I actually have a kind of a two-part question. The first one is about partners. There are some VCs that have kind of like a family of stable, where they kind of use a stable member as being a customer of one of their new startups, etc. Like especially down Sand Hill Road, I've seen that happen. What is your opinion about that? Is that something that a VC, that one should look out for a VC to bring in if one is looking for a VC? Or is that just something that is a little bit questionable?
Is that the two questions? Or
no, that's the first part. The second part was, what is your opinion of things like Y Combinator and things like that?
That's an interesting one. The first one's interesting. I've never actually heard of that. I mean, VCs, you do sometimes have to worry, and I think this is what you're referring to, that a VC will have an investment in a company, and they will use you to help that company. And I think that's what you're referring to. So they will say, hey, I'd like you to go talk to company X because I think they should know about what you're doing. And I don't want to tell them because that would be bad. But they, will march you in to tell Company X all about your company, and who knows what'll happen, but it'll probably be good for Company X. I've seen that happen occasionally where I'd like you to try and sell the product, and they're really just giving them a big heads up that something's there. And frequently what may come out of that is if you're trying to get funding, they're going to say, why don't you let us buy you? All right, so then is that bad if they say, I'd like to buy you?
Depends on the amount.
Depends on the price. Depends on the price, right? Depends on the price, and it depends on what you want in life. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things that depend. It's not bad though, right? But and I don't know too many venture capital. There are none that I work with on an ongoing basis that do that. Every time I see that, I kind of back away from it. Does everyone know what we're talking about? You just VCs in general are much more invested in the companies they've already invested in than the companies they might invest in. And you have to be aware of that. So when they want to introduce you to someone and you think that they're competitive or that you don't understand, say, I don't really want to do that. I don't see why. I know that if you make that a requirement, I don't think I'm going to do that requirement. I'm going to have to find someone else because it makes me nervous. I don't understand why that's good for my company. Maybe you can help me understand that. Boy, if you fire that warning shot across their bow and they tell you to keep going, they're either sleazes or they have a really good reason. And you got to listen and make a judgment call on that. So what aspect of the Y Combinators you say, are they good ideas?
Yeah, I just kind of wonder what your opinion about that type of kind of chaotic new approaches.
The what approach?
From the outside, it looks a little bit chaotic.
Chaotic, okay. Look at why, you know, I've been traveling for days and days. I travel recently all the time. There's a lot of reasons why I should be home tonight instead of sitting here talking to you guys. All right? The reason I'm here is that I do everything I can to help as many people as possible in the world feel useful. And one of the ways that people feel useful is starting companies. So I try to do everything I can to support entrepreneurship. Anything that I see out there that is trying to help people get to the stage of creating a company is by definition good to me. All right, so I don't, you know, there's different degrees of effectiveness, but every time I see some group trying to get together, and this group, you know, the MIT Venture Forum, this is great stuff. So you know, do they want too much of your company for too little? You know, make your own mind up about that. You know, go get alternatives. The only time, I mean, there's a whole bunch of lessons on negotiating. Always have a back door. Always have an alternative. You know, find an alternative to them, and then you can decide whether you think they're good for you. But in general, anyone who's helping start companies, I'm for. All right? That's it.
You guys both mentioned that you shouldn't fall in love with the numbers and that you should express the quantitative financial projections because that's kind of like the concrete thing that the VCs can hold on to. I was just wondering, like, for those of us that don't have like an MBA, or is there like a resource or strategy that you would recommend so we could like thoroughly express those when we're doing it?
Actually, the book MBA for Dummies is actually quite good, believe it or not.
Are you reading that, or did you relate to it?
I mean, your question is what are the resources to learn about that?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say there's two ways. Learn it yourself, go out and educate yourself, or even go to school. But I think there's plenty of resources that you can learn, or find a team member who who's a good spreadsheet jockey and who loves that stuff and can work with you.
So the most, so I don't get, I mean, I have an MBA, but and I took a lot of accounting, but I don't consider myself an accountant at all. And unfortunately, I'm no good at spreadsheets either. I'm totally terrible at them, right? And I wish I were better. I really do. So knowing somebody that can build models on spreadsheets, find somebody that can do that, you know. And because if you can't do that, the accounting is pretty easy. I hate to say this. Don't worry about revenue recognition. Worry about cash in the door. Remember, customers don't pay you right away unless you get it up front. And then count everything you're going to spend money on and try not to spend it on too many things. Then sum all of that up.
Very well.
Do you guys watch the Shark Tank by chance?
I have
watched
seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it twice.
Since you brought it up, I say there's some really good things about Shark Tank, but just remember, it's mostly entertainment. Right?
Yeah, and-
But it is a reality show. Presumably these are real investments
Yeah.
that the sharks are making, but some of the valuations are way off. You know,
It's
in
all
my
in
opinion.
negotiation. It is
Yeah.
entertainment. So I've seen that, right? And it makes my teeth great sometimes. But I feel the same way about American Idol too. You know, so it's hard to tell the difference between them to me. Except all of a sudden I turned it on thinking I was going to hate it, and then they got in this negotiation between them, and I just love that part. That was really cool. That guy who had the sports mug. Did anyone see that one? He had this the sports mug would untwist from the bottom. So he had two caps on it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And he had Mark Cuban. He's not a very likable guy, I gotta say. And then some other guy who seems pretty straight but very boring, you know, competing with his sport. I love that part. That was pretty cool.
It does have some educational value. So.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, actually, they get about 2.5 minutes to pitch their business. And if you think about it, they do a pretty good job. Of course, they've been coached and they've rehearsed this. And so it's the value, if you go to pitch, take some notes from Shark Tank, from the entrepreneurs who are pitching, and do it as well as they do, and you'll be ahead of the
so
game.
I've got to say, because I was afraid that they were going to be denigrating the entrepreneurs, and I just was so afraid that, and it wasn't so bad. They were really kind of prepped, and I thought they were relatively respectful, even when they said no. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, the sharks are disrespectful to each other.
Right. How many people have seen Borat pitching the so-called VC in New York? Was he Borat then, or was he one of his other characters?
LEG?
LEG, that's right. So I don't know how to do. I can do a Borat accent, but this is. So he goes in, he pitches a guy who's actually an investment banker. So we VCs don't like to be compared to that, but it is a guy that I knew, and I don't know how they get hooked in, but he was sitting there going, looking at the camera, you know, and LEG came in and. He goes, the first thing I say, I wish I could do his accent. The first thing you have to do is segment the market. I'm doing Borat now, but he says you have to make sure you target your market exactly. He says, so here, and he goes up to the whiteboard, we have the universe. And he draws a huge circle of all the people that eat ice cream. Right? And here, and he draws another circle that's almost identical to the first circle, but not quite, or overlapping totally, are all the people who have hands. And he pulls out the ice cream eating glove, which is something that you'd see in a doctor's office, right? So, you know, these presentations go both ways.
So we got a couple more. I think it's also it's 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I'm just telling Dave.
All right, okay. Yeah.
I thought we'd maybe just run a couple minutes over.
Oh, that's fine. We
fine,
started
that's
late.
fine.
That's fine with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of related to the story that you just shared, comment on finding the right audience for your pitch versus the wrong audience for your pitch.
That's a great question.
Well, it's important. Let me just take.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll set you up.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I read an article today about this a new startup called Well Fund or something like that, Fund Well, and the idea is you give them some information about your business and they'll recommend funding sources for you, what type of funding, and they got a list of 27 different funding sources.
Wow.
So that's the key issue about finding the right audience is matching your business, what your funding needs are in the stage of your business to the right kind of right funding source. We tend to focus here in this community on angel investors, but there are lots of other ways to get funding other than angel investing.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much money you're trying to raise and what the potential return is. And so you got to kind of figure out who's likely to want to invest in that first. I don't think there are very many really wrong audiences to pitch. They may be total waste of time, but they're not wrong in that you're not risking death or anything by pitching the wrong person, right? You're just not going to get anywhere. So you try and size it right, you'll get a no, that's not a venture deal. What that usually means is you're not going to be big enough for us to get an outlandish return to make up for all the mistakes we've made, for all the barking dogs, right? And there's nothing wrong with the outlandish return because that's what you want also. So I'm not, generally when people say it's not a venture deal, it just doesn't have the potential to be big, to be really big.
But does that answer your question about finding the right audience? I'm not sure we did. Yeah.
I think a number of people write their plan, make the pitch, but the audience for the pitch isn't deep enough in that area to be conversant, or I think a lot of
I think that turn this around, know your audience as opposed to choose your try to do your best at choosing it, but once you've chosen it, you're about to show up, figure out who's going to be sitting there. The guy at Influence that I was talking about earlier, Henry Lawson, his name is, he pitched the angel community, and if he had kept going, he could have gone public. I mean, it was just amazing what Henry learned about the people that are going to be in the audience. By the time he walked in to give him the audience, he'd figure out their names, he'd remember them, he knew what their hobbies were, he'd do internet research and find out who he was pitching. And oh my gosh, was that impressive, it really worked. So know who you're pitching to. The choosing it, that's great advice, but figure out how much money you want to raise. And then the one thing I have to say you got to watch out for is personal introductions to potential investors. So when you've called a marker in and a friend has introduced you to one of their friends, and that happens to me a lot. Back down your expectations after you've done your research. If they really have never invested in anything like you, then start the pitch out by saying, look, at what I'm hoping for is to get some advice. And in the back of your mind, you might get them as an advisor if they're really that good. But don't let them off the hook of having to say, no, I don't do this stuff later on because you've done your research. Otherwise, if they're not introduced by a friend, they probably won't see you. And it's all no problem at all because they won't see you because it wasn't appropriate for what they do.
And remember, for every time you get turned down, you always want to ask, well, do you know anybody else who would be interested in this? It's always,
it's true.
Keep the momentum going.
And incidentally, when I go out when I align myself with a company now, I'm much less of a venture capitalist now than I am an entrepreneur. I am paid by venture capitalists, fortunately, so far. But I'm paid by 3 funds, and there's a 4th one I'm sort of winding down. But when I do a deal, I fall in love with the deal, and I'm totally committed personally to the deal. I hardly ever put money in, but I put my heart and soul and commitment and name in. And after I've done that, I'm pretty well known in the venture community. You'd be amazed at how hard it still is to raise money. So it's not an easy path. I mean, there's no, people, I'll probably, for every deal I do now, I'll probably make 10 pitches and get, for every one that I get really to the next stage. That's even with knowing them really well. So.
Is there perhaps one last question, or should we cut it for tonight?
Okay.
Thanks.
Well,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Wrap.
Well done.
That was great.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Fun working together.
Yeah, that was great.